Joining us on the Guadalupe Radio Network to talk all about her experience in Rome in early May is Janet Northrup. Janet and her husband Bobby are longtime parishioners at St. Michael the Archangel Catholic Church, which is located in the Galleria area of Houston. Janet, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate your being here in the studio.
You are so welcome. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so interested to hear about your pilgrimage to Italy and your time in Rome in the middle of the conclave, not knowing, you and your husband not knowing that you would be there in the middle of everything going on with the election of Pope Leo XIV. So give me a little bit of overview here about how this happened, Janet. You and your husband were with a group coming from Houston to go on what is essentially a tour of Italy, right?
Yeah, basically it was a 14-day pilgrimage, basically, to see the shrines of Italy. Mm-hmm. Started in Milan, Turin, Florence, Assisi, Siena, Pisa, Loretta, and then we ended up in Rome, and the last 5 days were to be spent in Rome. And part of the Roman portion of it, the Rome part of it, where we were going to be able to have a audience with Pope Francis. And, of course, we knew we weren't going to be able to because Pope Francis had passed away before we had left on this tour. But this tour was set up like over a year ago, and we weren't sure what the Rome part of it would bring. Mm-hmm. Because it was, I kept thinking I felt sorry for the tour group that we were with because they were going to have to, modify things in Rome different than what they were, plus with all the crowds that were going to be coming in.
And I imagine it was probably a little disappointing you guys were going to have an audience in theory with Pope Francis, and that didn't happen that way. But then, like you said, not knowing what was going to happen.
Exactly. And we were hoping we'd be able to see his tomb, which we did. We were able to visit his tomb. Okay. In St. Mary's Basilica, St. Mary Major. And then, they announced when the conclave was going to start. And so we got to Rome. We were there for 5 days at the end of our tour, and we got to Rome basically on the 5th of
5th of May.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we heard the conclave was going to occur because they said, the timeline wasn't real, secure. It was just as far as how long it was going to take for him to lie in wait and to have the funeral and when they were going to start the conclave. So then we found out that the conclave was going to be while we were in Rome. So we were down at the piazza, and all the cardinals had come in the day after we arrived, and some of them had come in that same day. And we went down to the piazza on the day that they began with the Mass at the Sistine Chapel and the walk-in of all the cardinals. And
I got to just take a moment here just to let that sink in, Janet. So you and your husband, Bobby, and again, you were with this group, Father Wayne from St. Michael at the time, Father Francis from St. Cecilia Catholic Church, and you guys didn't know that you were going to be there at the same time that all of these cardinals from around the world were arriving, much less all these other clergy members from all around the world arriving for this conclave. What was it like just that first day in Rome, seeing everyone start to arrive?
It was exciting because I thought, oh my gosh, I still couldn't believe that we were going to be there potentially for even the conclave beginning. And I said, well, I know we'll at least be able to see black smoke. We may not see white smoke, but we'll probably see black smoke. But and it was just exciting to watch everybody come in and all all of the religious that came in and that were there, and then a lot of the youth were there because they were going to have the St. Carlos Acutis.
Oh yeah, the canonization
was there. Right. Was going to be there, and we did get to go see him. But it was just so exciting, and the energy was just amazing. And we got to see when they walked. They had a lot of big screens set up like they do for concerts and that type of thing, so that you could see everything with a really good view. They weren't letting, when the cardinals came in, they weren't letting anybody down into the piazza, but they had it blocked off and you could see in to a certain degree. And they did let the priests and other religious go in a little bit further, but not too far in. It was pretty well blocked off.
Yeah.
But
and I imagine from the moment you guys got there around May the 5th, I imagine it was just packed the whole time.
It was packed. It was packed the whole time.
And I'm trying to remember the timeline here because Pope Leo was elected May 8th.
Correct.
You guys were there around the 5th of May. And then tell me what was going on those several days when you guys were there.
Well, we were going on different tours while we were there, basically, and seeing the Vatican Museum and all the 7 majors, basilicas for the 4 majors and the 3 minors, and because we wanted to walk through all the doors, so we were able to do that. And they were coordinating all of this, around the conclave.
Yeah, I imagine it was kind of a bit on the fly.
It was. Like I said, the woman that was our guide over there was just amazing how she coordinated everything and we got to basically see everything that we were supposed to see and then some. I mean, it was just like Rome was like the grand finale on the trip that we had never anticipated was going to occur.
Right. It all seemed to culminate, Janet, on May the 8th, the day of the election of Pope Leo XIV, because you guys really were there, probably all day until the late night hours, right? So describe to me what the atmosphere was like.
It was exciting. Everybody was just, in wait. And there weren't a lot of people, some that would stay just kind of around the piazza. Mm-hmm. But that day we went and had a tour of the Vatican Museum. And then some of them went on, there was a tour of the Colosseum. And that was in the morning, and then we all had lunch. And then Father Francis, Father Wayne, and my husband and I, and then another couple, we were going back. We had lunch. It was about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, maybe somewhere in the afternoon. And so we took a cab back to our hotel, which is about 20 minutes away from the Piazza, St. Peter's Basilica. And so when we were heading back, I was going, why is it so much traffic heading in the other direction? And so the taxi driver pulled it up on his phone, and he goes, we've got white smoke. And I was like, what? So we hooked him to our hotel. We were in 2 different taxis, grabbed Father Wayne, and we just started running back down to the piazza so that we could see. And the closer you got, the more and more people were there. And there were so many religious. Black was just, a lot of clerics and habits. But nuns were running, and, there were habits flying. I mean, just, everybody trying to get down there to see what the announcement was going to be.
How close could you get, Janet?
Not that close. I mean, it was tough because it got so crowded. And we lost Father Wayne and Father Francis because my husband was behind me, and I turned around to see where he was, and I looked back around, and they were just melted into the mass of people.
Yeah, I can imagine just what the streets were lined with people just standing there. Right?
Everywhere around it. It was it was, you were mashed up against one another. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then when they came out and said, we've got a pope, after he had signed his acknowledgement that he was going to accept it, and they said, Papa Americana, and the Italians were ecstatic. And, you weren't really sure how, and I said, what did they say? And this guy next to me said, he goes, are you American? And I said, how could you tell? Yes, I said, and he goes, it's an American pope. And I said, are you kidding me? It was so exciting. And he goes, yeah. And I said, where is he from? And he said, Chicago. And I'm going, who's from Chicago? I couldn't think of who it was.
Right, yeah.
And I hadn't really looked at who the contenders were at all. People would ask me what I thought, who I'd like. And I said, I just want the Holy Spirit to lead the Cardinals.
Amen.
And whatever the Holy Spirit leads them to be, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But it was very exciting. And then just to see the energy and the excitement, and I mean, there were no boos, nothing negative at all. It was just all very exciting. And so it was really cool. And when he came out and spoke Italian, I thought that was strategically great rather than English, because he was in Italy and, Italian and Spanish. And it was just
when in Rome.
Exactly. And that's what he did. And it was just, I think that helped make it go over it even better. But
so then how did y'all end up seeing it? Were y'all watching a TV screen somewhere?
There were screens, big screens set up. We could see it, but it was really tiny. As far as when he walked out, you could barely see him. But on the screens, it was huge, so you could see
because I can also imagine
well.
all the shops everywhere around the Vatican, they probably all had TVs on with everything on there. So even if you couldn't get necessarily close, you could probably feel the energy.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And the kids were climbing up on top of a van that was parked there. And I mean, everybody was just wanting to see and just standing there, with bated breath, just waiting for the announcement.
Yeah.
And it was very exciting. It still seems surreal because it was just, it's a chance of a lifetime that I'd never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be there for that.
And it's so historic that we have a pope who's from America. I mean, we don't know if that's ever going to happen again in our lifetimes.
267. I know. Yeah. I mean, it was just incredible. It really, really is. And it was just amazing. It really was.
And I think, Janet, you were telling me that you and your husband ended up staying out late because of just everything that was going on. Imagine you guys were talking to people, walking around everywhere.
Yeah. And everybody was very excited. I mean, it was just, it's just the finale. It was just like incredible. And in fact, I lost my voice because everybody was yelling, yay, Anyway, it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is really exciting. So I was going to say, did you end up running into any other Americans and end up kind of conversing about that?
Well, when we were in St. Mary Major, we saw Bishop Cahill. He was there on another pilgrimage.
Bishop Brendan Cahill.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he left, their pilgrimage left the day before.
Did they really?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. So they just missed it.
Just missed it.
Wow.
But yeah, there were 45 on our pilgrimage from both St. Michael's and other parishes, basically. Onesies, twosies from different parishes in St. Cecilia.
Yeah.
A lot of followings of Father Wayne and Father Francis.
Very good. Decompressing after that, Janet, that whole situation, I imagine you and your husband are just kind of not doing much the day after on May the 9th. When you were praying about that, going to these afterwards, coming back to Houston, how do you pray after something like that? Does it energize your prayer life?
Oh, for sure, because you just feel so blessed that, and I believe it was divine providence that we were there to be able to be there for that. And, for sure, it was just like, when I see Pope Leo and I just keep thinking I was there, it was just, it's still hard for me to believe that it actually occurred, but it did. So yeah, it'll be forever memorialized in my brain and in my mind. But yeah, it definitely does, because you feel so much a part of the universality of our Catholic faith, you know. And to watch it on TV is great, and you probably saw it better than I did being there, but just being there was just extraordinary. Yeah. It really was.
That's incredible. I know that so much of our conversation has been about Rome, but I don't want to overshadow this pilgrimage that you went on, because you and your husband also had, I could imagine, a spiritually uplifting event going to these other shrines, holy places in Italy. Before May 5th, before you guys had got there to Rome, where all did you go in Italy?
Well, we went to all the basilicas for the doors, and the inside and outside of Rome. Basilicas I had not been to before, like St. Paul's outside of Rome, and St. Mary Major I'd never been into before. I said been into St. Peter's Basilica. So it was a beautiful trip to just be able to do that and to walk through all the doors and pray to enable that, plenary indulgence, that type of thing. And I went to confession while we were over there with and they had them set up all over the place for purposes in any language that you could imagine. And it was just beautiful. And we saw we went to two places for the Eucharistic miracles, which were incredible, and had Mass, we had Mass everywhere. And we actually got to have Mass in St. Peter's Basilica's main altar. And both Father Francis and Father Wayne were able to come celebrate there. And that was very exciting for them, just to be able to do that. And it was the whole trip was amazing. You bond so much on these pilgrimages with the people because you share the same foundation, the same values, and you're seeing these things and then sharing it with one another. And we were all sharing pictures and, that type of thing.
Let me go back a second. You and your husband, Bobby, had arrived in Italy around April 26th. So
right.
Remind me which cities you went to prior to Rome. I think you had mentioned Assisi was one of them.
Right, and we arrived in Milan. Okay. That's where we started. And then went to Turin for the Shroud of Turin, but we weren't able to actually see the Shroud of Turin because apparently the bishop there closed it and they don't want anybody seeing it for purposes of just preserving it and that type of thing. But
I think I'd heard about that.
Yeah. Then we went to Florence and Pisa, Siena, and then Assisi, and we stayed 2 nights in Assisi, so that was nice. Yeah. And my husband and I had never been there before, and it was just beautiful. And I love St. Francis and St. Clare, so it was really nice to be there. And then we went to Cassia and Loreto, Macerta, Lanciano, and saw the Eucharistic miracle sites, and that was pretty amazing. And then we went to the St. Michael Cave, which I had never...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, had been to before, and it was beautiful. And, of course, we're from St. Michael's, so that was pretty neat to be able to
Makes
see
sense.
that.
You got to go there.
Yeah, exactly. And San Giovanni, Rotunda, and Padre Pio was beautiful. His whole pilgrimage site there was just gorgeous. Just amazing, the mosaics and everything, and it's fairly new, but it was beautiful. I mean, we saw so much. It's just, it's a little overwhelming sometimes, but the 5 days in Rome was just remarkable, and it was nice we had that much time there to be able to be a part of that, and then to be able to, like you say, decompress the day before we left.
Yeah, what a blessing for you and your husband, the whole group, that you guys could be there for as long as you can. I know that some people, have very busy schedules and couldn't be there necessarily as long as you guys were, from around April 26th to May the 10th. But that's incredible that you guys were able to take that all in and experience all that. Janet, my last question for you would be, what would be your, why would you encourage other Catholics, people of faith, to visit holy sites like this in Italy, whether it's Florence, Rome, Assisi? Why do you think that's beneficial for one's faith, one's spiritual life?
Well, you realize the communion of saints that we have, and the 2,000 years of history and commentary and foundation for our faith, and it just makes you appreciate it more and more. And and I'm a cradle Catholic, but I still feel like I'm on the tip of the iceberg, of trying to understand the beauty and the richness and the tradition of our faith. So it just makes you really appreciate it and feel so very blessed that, we have our faith, and it's something that's shared universally. And it's something that really resounds and with me, especially when you go to all the different countries. The Mass is always the same, regardless of what language it's in. And it's and to watch all the people that come up for communion and to receive the Eucharist, it's beautiful. It's very inspiring.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it.
I love that. I love that our church is the universal church, and so you can go anywhere and experience the Mass, see these holy places, like you said, really get that connection with the saints who are in heaven watching over all of us. So that's incredible. Again, want to thank you so much. Again, encourage other people also, if they're able to go on something like a pilgrimage like that, or maybe just go to a holy shrine. There's so many opportunities for people to be able to come closer to God. You had mentioned just going to confession. So I hope people will remember to participate in the life of the church and to be able to experience that, even in their own parish as well. Janet Northrup, we appreciate it very much. Again, Janet Northrup is a longtime parishioner at St. Michael the Archangel Catholic Church, which is located in the Galleria area of Houston. Janet, thank you so much for sharing your experience. We really appreciate it.
Sure, you're very welcome.